Okay, everybody, we're here again. Mocofootball.com weekly podcast. Here with my man Damon Anderson. Damon, last week we had some pretty interesting games, mainly the game of the week. We're going to get into that for a second. But overall, what do you think about week one? How excited were you about the whole situation of getting Mocofootball back on the docket again for us to watch?
Last week was extremely exciting, if for nothing but football. High school football has officially started in Montgomery County and throughout the rest of the state. We had some great matchups right off the bat. Even though it's week one, matchups that will most likely have playoff implications. We had some questions lingering throughout the postseason that were answered by some. Others still are questions about. Hopefully we'll get a better idea here in week two. It was a great weekend for football in Montgomery County.
Man, I was excited. I went out to the Clarksburg QO game, obviously, and the Clarksburg kids really came out and packed the stands. They really cheered on their team hard, and I think the team really fed off their energy. And it was just good to see.
Well, I've been saying this pretty much all preseason that this was going to be a great matchup, be a lopsided victory by either team, regardless of who the victor was. Almost two teams with very similar play styles. They love the power run up the middle in between the tackles and sprinkle some things on the outside. In a rough draft last week, I mentioned that whoever wins this game, it's going to come down to turnovers, and that certainly rang true. Looking at the game and looking at the final stats, it was pretty much equal across the board. It was a great game, back and forth.
Right.
Quince literally right off the bat comes out and punches Clarksburg in the mouth with a 79-yard touchdown run by Kyle Green, who immediately put notice out for the rest of the county. He should be mentioned when it comes to the top running backs. And then Clarksburg literally didn't blink after they took that punch and came right back with that 80-plus yard kickoff return. So after that, I think both teams settled down. They ended up getting a touchdown apiece in the first quarter, and then by the second quarter, the defense has really settled in, and it became the grudge match that I thought it would be. It was a really close game. I mean, you always say, turnovers win games, but it definitely shone through during this game. I mean,
right, absolutely.
Down 19-22, fourth quarter, 35. Less than 3 minutes left, and Clarksburg throws an interception in the end zone, and that's pretty much all she wrote. Was able to run out the clock after that.
For me, that's one of the most craziest beginnings to a game I've ever seen in Moco. You've seen off the first play somebody score before. That's not unusual, but for that to be answered back by a 80-yard kick return, I mean, that was when I kind of sat there and said, okay, we might be in for a classic right here. The kid Tavis Holland from Clarksburg, he showed himself to be definitely a player of the year candidate in the county. I mean, he did everything. He ran the ball. He caught the ball well. He returned. He was the one that had the kick return. He did everything. QO had some problems in the back end of their defense. Tavis really exposed them in that respect. But the problem for Clarksburg, and I think this is going to be the problem for anybody that faces QO, is are you going to stop them for 4 quarters? I give Clarksburg credit. They hung in there the whole game. But you could tell that, let's say there was like another quarter, I could tell that they would have been in some trouble. That's going to be the question. Anybody that faces QO, their quarterback is not, to be honest about it, he's not Mark Pierce from Northwest, but he did the job last week. He managed the game. He didn't have any turnovers. He managed the game beautifully. He did exactly what they wanted him to do. As long as he's able to complete passes to that big tight end that they have and make smart decisions, they're going to be really hard to beat. Kyle Green, I believe he had 26 carries for over 220 yards. Everybody wants to talk about that 79-yard touchdown, but really the thing that was impressive to me was the 6-yard gains, the 7-yard gains, the 5-yard gains where he was just pounding the defense.
Absolutely. I think a little bit of what we saw during that game, Clarksburg's lack of depth, at least compared to Quince Orchard.
Right.
I know they had a lot of guys going both ways. Quince Orchard not so much.
Right.
And as the game went on, we saw several Clarksburg players going down with cramps. Very humid, hot night.
Yeah.
Playing 4 quarters of hard-nosed football. That's something that I suspect Clarksburg's going to have to deal with as the season progresses. Even though they're all 4A teams, I mean, you can look at the roster top to bottom and see where a team like Clarksburg has to rely on their kids going both ways, including special teams.
Right.
And that takes a toll on you during the game, and it takes an extreme toll on you throughout the season. So I'm sure they'll figure it out. Some of the kids on the bench are going to step up throughout the season and give the starters a breather. Quince has been doing a great job with the rotation of kids, not just in this game, but over the past few years. They have a roster big enough and a talented second and third string where they can step in and give the starters series off or two, and that really helps toward the end of the game, especially when you're a running team and you can just pound and pound and pound the ball.
Another game that we were talking about last week, we thought that it was going to be a surefire thing, but kind of turned out to be kind of a question mark, was Seneca Valley Wheaton. Now, going to halftime was 7-0, I believe, and Seneca Valley ended up pulling away. But we thought that this was going to be like a 45-0 game at half, and we were gonna. Obviously, that's not what happened. Did this show more about Seneca Valley, or did it show more about Wheaton, in your opinion?
I'm leaning toward it. Well, I'm a little bit torn. Wheaton definitely showed up, not just to show up. They showed up to win the game. To those boys, I do believe their running back carried the load for the Knights, and not only pounded the ball against the Screaming Eagles, but kept their offense off the field for the majority of the first half. And I think that played into the score being as low as it was. Obviously, in the second half, Seneca Valley made whatever adjustments needed to be made and turned it into a blowout. And another thing, I mean, even though, we were expecting Seneca Valley to just come out the gate and just beat the brakes off of Wheaton, they still shut them out.
Right.
They kept them out the end zone. I don't believe it was even close. So hats off to the Screaming Eagle defense. Now, we said in previous weeks, this is a young team. They need to figure out, the identity of their team. And it only took a half. Right. That's not bad.
Right.
Now, I don't think they can get off to a slow start next week because they're going to be taking on the Rockville Rams, who once again had a shootout with Richard Montgomery. Right. And you don't want to get off to a slow start versus that offense.
Right.
Seneca Valley was able to shut them down last year with relative ease. But this is another year under the belt for Mr. Chuck Reese. I think this is a game that the Rams have been looking or have marked their calendar for, probably since the end of last year.
Right.
But going back to Wheaton, even though they got shut out 35-0 by Seneca Valley, I think that's a respectable showing, especially in the first half. That's something they can build on in the upcoming weeks, especially versus Magruder next week. That's a winnable game for Wheaton.
Wheaton is not as bad as we probably thought initially. Ike and Ernie are definitely, developing something over there that, maybe we just kind of were overlooking. But at the same time, I don't want to speak too early right now. If that is any indication of how Seneca Valley is going to play throughout the season, we're really going to be waiting for the Masters versus Urbana in the playoffs, and because if they play like that, it's not going to be a question. It's not going to be close. So that's why I was kind of concerned is, just for the sake of competition and having a good season and having something to talk about, I hope it was just a bunch of young kids trying to get their feet wet and trying to find their way and everything like that. But at the same time, it was definitely concerning to see that score.
I couldn't believe it when the reports came in. It was 0-0 at the half.
It was wild.
It was. I almost had to double check to make sure it wasn't a digit missing on the Seneca Valley score.
I did. I double checked with a few people, and they texted people at the game, and they said, it's 0-0. And from what I understand, Seneca Valley is trying to break in some new things on offense and try and do some different things, but still, Wheaton is not even close. I mean, when we talked about the DCC, I mean, out of all the teams, they were probably last or next to last with Kennedy. So out of the DCC, they're not even considered an elite team. For Seneca Valley to be 0-0 with Wheaton, it was very interesting to me. I just hope they can get it together in time to face Damascus, because we need that storyline. I mean, Damascus-Seneca Valley is one of the biggest rivalries, not only in this county, but in the state.
Teams, schools, or just football fans in general, more often than not, Seneca Valley is the first name they think of. And the reason is obvious. They hold the record for the most state championships in the state of Maryland. And it's kind of like, and I know a lot of people will hate for me to say this, like the Cowboys in the NFL.
Absolutely.
When the Cowboys are good, it's good for the NFL.
Absolutely.
And the same goes for Seneca Valley and Montgomery County. Yep. It's good for business and the sport of football in this area if Seneca Valley is good. Not to say that they're not good. That's not even remotely close, because they are an extremely good team.
Right.
But the pedestal we hold the Screaming Eagles on is we hold them to a higher standard.
Absolutely.
Than most other schools. And with that being said, I fully expect them to improve throughout the season, and them versus Damascus later on this year will be a must-see game.
You know, they're not a bad team by any stretch of the imagination, but when we're talking about Damascus is a really, really good, if not great team. So when we're talking about a viable threat to them, you're going to have to be somewhere near there, you know. And right now, as we sit here right now today, they're not even in the same stratosphere right now. So just like the Cowboys in the NFL, Notre Dame in AA, when those schools are good, when those programs are good, better for everybody. As much as you either hate them or you love them. Like you said, you go anywhere outside of the county, and you mention Montgomery County football, more often than not, you're going to hear Seneca Valley's name. They did explode in that third quarter, you know, and really put the game away in that third.
35-0 shutout at the end of the day.
Yeah, really put the game away in that third quarter. So hopefully they're more of what they look like in the third than in the first two quarters. Talking about traditional powers, transitioning over to Gaithersburg at Sherwood. Sherwood obviously came away with a convincing win. What did you think about that game, and what do you think about Sherwood as a top team in this county going forward?
It was a big statement game for Sherwood. They got revenge for the big loss they took last year, and it served the rest of the county on notice that, you know, the Warriors are still here, and they're still a team that can't be overlooked. And especially there's a momentum going into next week, because their schedule is not getting any easier. They have a Blair Blazer squad that is trying to make their name, trying to be mentioned in the upper echelon of Montgomery County 4A schools. Sherwood, I mean, the passing game looked excellent. It was absolutely ridiculous. Young Mr. Sims, 10 receptions, 220 yards. That's pretty ridiculous, especially in high school. I mean, he was targeted a lot. He made tremendous catches, and he had a lot of yards after the catch. I mean, he put the county on notice that he's one of the premier wide receivers in the county. And Sherwood also supplemented that with the solid running game. Sussman, I do believe that's how you pronounce his name, 19 carries, 100 yards. He did a great job in the passing game. I do believe he only had 2 incompletions. That's ridiculous. Nobody can overlook that offense. They looked really good. And the defense stepped up. I mean, one score, that's pretty solid.
No, absolutely. I was really, really happy to see that score. Marcus Sims, he's been dealing with a foot injury. He sat out, I believe, both scrimmages. He's rounding into shape now. Even with that being said, he had 10 catches for 227 yards. Sussman really showed me something this past game. That was my biggest question with Sherwood, was the quarterback position. I saw that they had the pieces on the outside, Travis Levy, Matthew Starnes, guys like that, along with Marcus, to be a really good team. Calvin Bacon, all those guys were really good players coming back from last year. But the quarterback position to me was the real question. And what Sussman did was to put me on notice, to put everybody else on notice. I think that, you know, they could give a lot of teams some headaches, that are out there. And I really look at them as one of the biggest sleepers in this county. Period. If they continue to build on what they have, they could possibly be a challenger. As far as Gaithersburg, they're young. They're bringing in a lot of new faces, offense and on defense, and I think that they're just gonna have to go through it a little bit, And I think that they'll pick up a lot of the stuff throughout the season, kind of like Seneca Valley. They don't really have an identity yet. They still can be a solid team. It's just
absolutely, like you said, Sherwood definitely put everyone on notice. It was a great showing, and I really want to take my hats off to the defense. Outside of that 58-yard run that they gave up to Simpkins from Gaithersburg, they pretty much shut them down the entire game.
Right.
That's a good thing going forward because next 4 weeks they're going to be facing some pretty solid offensive teams. So for the defense to come out with only giving a touchdown off of a big run, that gives you confidence and momentum moving forward.
Oh, I mean, Sherwood's schedule is not easy. They got a hard schedule. They got a really hard. That's why I needed when I initially did the Elite Six. Before I could put them up to where I wanted to put them, I needed to hear some good things coming from their camp about the quarterback position, and I did, because it's going to be key for them to have a quarter. If Susserman can play like that throughout the season, they're going to be really, really tough to beat. Sherwood's been always a I formation team, play action with the waggle or whatever the case may be. From what I understand, they ran a lot of shotgun, a lot of spread. It's exciting to hear that for the first time in a while, they were able to move the ball pretty consistently. That's where I'm at with that. Transitioning over to this week's games. This week's game of the week will be Sherwood and Blair. David, we've been kind of talking about this one ever since the schedules came out. And we really thought that this game could be a swing point game for each team. What do you think about this game? And do you think that Blair has a legit shot to knock it off Sherwood?
I believe they have a shot, but that does not mean I think they will win. That has more to do with Sherwood and less to do with Blair. Sherwood's week 1 showing, coupled with how they played in the preseason scrimmages, I see more of a contender-type team when they're matched up against the other top teams in Montgomery County. Blair, I mean, so far we've heard lots of good things. They had a great showing last week but at the end of the day, it's Kennedy. This is going to be their first big test of the season, to see whether they're ready to take that next step, to be in a conversation with the Sherwoods, the Paint Branches, the Northwest, Quince Orchard. So this is a big game for Blair, and it's equally a big game for Sherwood. Even if Sherwood comes out, depending on the final score, even if they win, but if it's less than 6 points or somewhere in that range, that's still something Blair can hang their hat on. That shows them that they're right there with Sherwood. But
absolutely,
if we end up with 21-0, 35-6 type game, it's more the same. Now, with that being said, last year's matchup was extremely close.
Right.
So I'm leaning toward another close matchup. But unfortunately, after that, Blair didn't do much for the rest of the season in terms of getting over that hump. So we'll see. But I'm definitely leaning heavily toward Sherwood in this matchup. I'm leaning 28-14. I think Sherwood doesn't want to leave any doubts in anybody's mind that, they're still a top contender in Montgomery County and the state.
I think that this game is the biggest game that's going to be played in the DCC since Seneca Valley came into Kennedy. I believe that was 2006 for a playoff game, which Kennedy actually won. I think Melvin Harris, that's the great Melvin Harris. Chinso, all those guys, Delano Ferguson, all those guys, man. That was a great team. And I think that this is the biggest game since then in the Down County Consortium. Because, I mean, we saw the new helmets. We see the bravado. We see that Blair is trying to carry themselves like a top-tier team. And I think that you have Sherwood coming in to your house. You're building something. You're returning a lot of guys. I think that this is going to be a big game for them. They're going to come out hyped. I think that for the first 2 quarters, I think it's going to be a good game. But I think that at the end of the day, Sherwood will pull away. Sherwood just has too much talent right now, on the offensive side of the ball especially. And I just don't think that Blair has the athletes to expose the weaknesses of Sherwood on the defensive side of the ball. I think that this is going to be the game where Sherwood makes a real statement. I think that a lot of people were saying that Gaithersburg was going to be down this year. I don't think they got a lot of credit for that win, honestly. That game kind of got overlooked because of the narrative of Gaithersburg and the fact that, a lot of people think that Gaithersburg is going to struggle this year. I think that this is going to be the statement game for Sherwood. I think that they're going to try to put their stamp on this game. Blair's going to come out. They're going to be turned up. I think that I'm going to go with 35-10. Somebody's going to have to explain to me X and O wise how or why they feel like they're going to be able to stop Sherwood on the offense side of the ball. Because I don't see any reason for me not to think that they can. I mean, they put up over 30 points on Gaithersburg. I don't see any reason to think that they're not going to be able to put up 30-plus on Blair either.
Even in a close game, I still have Sherwood winning. If I believe Sherwood is going to continue what they built on off of week 1, which I fully expect, it's going to be, at bare minimum, a 2-score game. Now,
going to our underrated or under-the-radar game of the week, which game, Damon, are you looking at as the game that, okay, not a lot of people are talking about, but this could be a game that on Saturday or Friday night we could be talking about?
Well, it's my under-the-radar game of the week, even though it's not necessarily under the radar. It's just we have some solid matchups this week, and we can only pick one. So my under the radar the game of the week is Rockville at Seneca Valley.
Yep.
For the reasons we spoke earlier, Seneca Valley, week 1, had a lackluster first half versus a lesser undermanned opponent in Wheaton. They still were able to turn it on in the second half and come out with a 35-0 victory versus a Rockville team who has one of the more high-powered offenses in the county, led by Chuck Reese. But their defense is also one of the worst in the county,
right,
giving up last year 34.5 points a game, and they picked up right where they left off. So it's an intriguing matchup. Seneca Valley is looking to hold steady as the number 2 3A team in Montgomery County, and Rockville's trying to lay claim to that spot, that they're a contender in Montgomery County 3A.
Right.
Another under-the-radar game that, again, isn't necessarily under the radar, but is Whitman at Quince Orchard.
Right.
For me personally, this is going to be a game that's going to answer a lot of questions that I have about Whitman. They got off to a solid start last week in their season with the 28-7 win over Blake. Now, the first true test of the season will take place at Quince Orchard in the Cougar Dome.
Right.
The Cougars are riding high off a hard-fought, emotional victory over Clarksburg last week. And they're also looking to hold steady as not only the top team in the county, but one of the top teams in the state.
Right.
And they certainly don't want to let Wheaton come in and take some shine off. So I'm expecting that to be another big game. It's at the very least a quality game to go check out. You're going to have several kids featured in that game that most likely will be playing on Saturdays in a couple of years.
To the Whitman QO game. I think that this game could be a game that be a little bit closer than people think. What I saw from QO was a lot of focus, really detailed. QO, when it comes on to the fundamentals of the game, very, very sound. I think that I believe that Whitman's strength and QO's strengths are the same things. Running the ball, physical style of brand of football. It's going to be hard for me to believe that Whitman can go toe for toe in a ring with QO for 4 quarters. I think that QO is going to come out and set a tone early that it's not the year for Whitman to knock us off. But I think that Whitman is going to hang it tough a little bit. I think that they're going to show that they have some talent. And honestly, I'm not really judging them off of this game. I think that I'll still think highly of them as long as they keep the score within a reasonable margin. Picking this game, I'm going to say 32 to 17. But I think that Whitman is going to be a viable opponent for anybody else in the county. It's just QO right now, they're so technically sound. They don't, outside of that one fumble at the end of the game last week, which was really uncharacteristic for them, they don't beat themselves. You're going to have to beat QO. And I think that QO is going to come out and dominate this game and really show that I think they're going to make a case for themselves to be the second team in the county. I think that they want to send a message to Damascus for next week saying, hey, we're coming. This is going to be the game where they send that message to Damascus.
Agreed, 100%. I honestly believe Quince Orchard will win this game going away. If they held Clarksburg to 3 scores, I expect them to hold Whitman to 1. So 28-7 victory for the Quince Orchard Cougars.
Okay.
Which will leave them riding high going into a crucial, high-powered game in week 3 versus Damascus.
Right.
With that being said, man, even though I've been high on them, all preseason going into this week, they can lose this game and still be where I expect them to be.
Exactly.
In week 10.
Right.
But what this will show us is, exactly how far they come. Now, if they get blown out like they did last year, 42-0,
right,
then I'm going to have to reevaluate
exactly
who I think is going to slide into that 4 spot. But, if they keep it respectable and move the ball on offense and show they've taken a step up, they're right on track where I think they're going to be. But with that being said, I expect Quince Orchard to win this game relatively easy.
Honestly, that's what I'm looking at. I don't think that they're going to win this game. If they're able, and I'm not even talking about the score necessarily, if they're able to make QO work during the game, right, I think that that's going to be a win for them going forward. I think that this will be the first game of the season where they're actually facing a good opponent they might face in the playoffs. I think that they're going to use this to gauge where they need to be. And I think that if they're able to move the ball a little bit, stop a QO, just frustrate them a little bit, that's going to show me that they're ready to take a next step and be a playoff contender and possibly be a team that could upset a team in the playoffs. But if they get blown out again, I think that we all have to kind of reevaluate what they are as a team, and are they really a team that we're going to be talking about going forward. To the Seneca Valley Rockville game, I think that this is a big game for both teams. I think that coming off of the kind of lackluster performance against Wheaton, I think Seneca Valley wants to set a tone, and I think Rockville wants that respect. I think they kind of feel disrespected in a certain kind of way. And I think that they want to show the county that they're a legit team. I think that it's going to be a tough game for Seneca Valley to stop them. I think that this is the game where Seneca Valley gets it going on offense. I think that they get into a rhythm, and I think that Seneca Valley is able to pull away late 38-21, a good solid win for the Screaming Eagles, and I think that they go forward and they get some confidence off this win, and they start building from here.
Absolutely. Week 2, in my opinion, we have more solid, even-ranked teams playing each other going into this week. So it's going to be another exciting week in Montgomery County football.
And transitioning over, the latest Elite Six came out. Some interesting things that came out of it. The top stayed relatively intact. Northwest, Damascus, and Quince Orchard 1, 2, and 3 respectively. Now Sherwood and Clarksburg are tied. Sherwood and Clarksburg are tied at 4, and we got Paint Branch at 6. That's going to ask a natural question: who do you think out of Sherwood and Clarksburg deserves to be 4, and who do you think, if you're going to choose somebody to be 4, somebody to be 5, who would you think? Who would you pick to be 4? Who would you pick to be 5?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement, and I'm sure everybody else is, with the top 3. I mean, there's no room to move Northwest or Damascus down,
right,
based off of their performances.
Right.
And obviously, Quince Orchard definitely deserves to hold on to that number 3 spot and not share it with Clarksburg. But after that, my personal rankings are a little different when we get to the 4, 5, and 6 teams. My number 4 in my personal Elite Six is Paint Branch.
Okay.
Based off of their victory last week, 20-6. It was a little that was going to be, but I don't see them any worse than. I actually see them better than Sherwood at this time.
Okay.
We'll find out in a few weeks. Right now, I have Paint Branch at the number 4 spot. Moving on to number 5, Sherwood makes an appearance in the official Mocofootball.com Elite 6 rankings, right, and my personal rankings.
Right.
Like I mentioned earlier, based off of their preseason and their Week 1 victory, they look like an extremely solid team. We can talk about in the same breath as Quince Orchard and Paint Branch. Quince Orchard and Paint Branch have been 2 solid upper teams in Montgomery County for a couple of years now, and Sherwood has been right there with them. So I can't find any reason not to have Sherwood in that number 5 spot. Closing out my rankings, my personal rankings, is Clarksburg. They lost out in a tough-fought game against Quince Orchard. It was a tough-fought game. Right. It could have went either way. Just some untimely turnovers, and that's all she wrote. You can't lose against a team like Quince Orchard and expect to come out with a victory. But I fully expect Clarksburg to take care of those issues moving forward, and I fully expect them to remain in my Elite Six moving forward. With that, closing out the Elite Six for me personally, other teams that I had in consideration were Whitman and Seneca Valley. Whitman, I still think they're a solid team, and I'm going to bring them. They're right on the cusp. I went back and forth between them and Clarksburg for quite some time on to slide into that 6th spot. But Clarksburg looked better in their loss than Whitman did in their victory.
Right.
So,
right.
And that just really has to do with quality of opponents.
Right.
But in Seneca Valley, that first half raised a lot of eyebrows around the county. They closed it out solidly, 35-0. Hopefully, a lot of things will be answered for both of those teams: Seneca Valley versus Rockville and Whitman versus Quince Orchard. We'll have a better idea of what we're working with those 2 teams moving forward.
I have the top 3: Northwest, Damascus, and Quince Orchard. I don't think there's any question about that. I have Sherwood as a solid 4. I can't argue with you too much with Paint Branch, because Paint Branch last year was a better team than Sherwood. For whatever reason, Springbrook plays them close every year. And I'm talking about Paint Branch. They always give Paint Branch some kind of trouble. So the 20-6 score wasn't really alarming to me at all. Springbrook is actually a solid program with a solid defense. And like I said, the crosstown rivals, they've been rivals since the 1960s. So I'm sure there were a lot of old heads out there rooting on your teams and things like that. But that's always a close game, a relative close game. So I wasn't too surprised about that. But The fact that they lost so much off their team, I'm going to have to see them in a big game first before I can feel comfortable with them being number 4. But I can't really argue with you. But I've Sherwood as a solid number 4 because they, out of all the teams out there, in my opinion, they had the best you did what you're supposed to do with. And I think that they went out and they did what they were supposed to do. They dominated that game. And I just have to give them credit for doing that. Clarksburg, I had at number 5, and that was because, and the reason why I didn't drop them down to number 6, even though no Paybrush won and Clarksburg lost, Clarksburg just looked so good to me, even though they lost. If you watched the game, you saw a lot of good things from Clarksburg, and there's no way you can't think that they're going to be a top team. But like I said, they're going to have to prove it. They're going to have to prove that they're a top team, and it's going to be one of those situations where they're going to have a lot of opportunities to do it. But I think that Pete Branch, like I said, they're a team that definitely has an elite coaching staff. I just want to see them in a really, really tough game to see what their new pieces and some of the new players, especially at quarterback, how they would react and if they can legit, return to the point where they had Bob Curry and Gaston Cooper. But I think that this list is a solid list. I don't really have much of a complaint about this list. I have Whitman and Seneca Valley hovering around that 6th spot too. Another team that I think that we need to look out for, 2 other teams honestly, is Rockville. Another one. If they ended up beating Seneca Valley, they're obviously going to have to be in consideration. And I don't know if you noticed what Churchill did last week. Now, it's BCC, so it's not necessarily the greatest thing in the world, but that was another do what you're supposed to do kind of games, and I feel like Churchill did that. So I'm going to pay, because we could all agree that Churchill has talent. They have kids over there that can play some football. It's just kind of, up and down, herky-jerky, so one way and then on next day to next, than the other way, that we can't really predict what they're going to do. And that's why we can't go all in with them, So they really have to show. But I'm going to keep an eye on them just to see what they're looking. Because we have a kid like Blake Dove, you're always going to be in the discussion. So I think that I'm going to keep an eye on them, see how they develop, and maybe they can sneak into the 6th spot as time goes on. I know you think I'm crazy over there. Just hold on. I'm just saying I'm going to keep an eye. I'm just saying I'm going to keep an eye on them. I'm not saying I'm putting them in the same conversation. It's just, just, hey, look over there once in a while, see what's going on. That's all it is, David. Don't call. I'm just putting it out there. Okay. Another week in the books. Like I said, Sherwood at Blair, game of the week. Everybody, please come out and support your teams, man. I mean, I was at Clarksburg and QO, and it was a great atmosphere. The kids feed off of it. Go out to the games, enjoy it. This is a great week. This is Mocofootball.com weekly podcast. See you next week.